Episode 2 of The Undoing was titled The Missing. As Grace struggles to reach Jonathan, she finds herself on the receiving end of Detectives Mendoza and O'Rourke's questions about the violent death they're investigating. Later, Grace's father insists she and Henry seek refuge at his house outside of the city. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. I'm back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of HBO's The Undoing. We're talking episode 2, titled The Missing. And there wasn't a lot missing from this episode. I mean, we got mic drop after big reveal. I mean, there was so much in this episode, and I'm so excited to break it all down in this spoiler review. But before we dive into it, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you all are following me on all my other social media accounts. That way you all can stay up to date of what's going on over here at Movie Files. If you are new to the channel, welcome to the community. Make sure you all subscribe to the channel and hit that bell so you don't miss any of my other The Undoing reviews, other TV reviews, movie reviews, live streams, all the fun things we do on this very channel. It would mean the world to me if you all can give this video a thumbs up. It helps out the channel, but I also really appreciate it. And in the comments, let's break down this episode. Let me hear your pros, your cons, your theories. Is it almost too easy that Jonathan is the murderer? Do we think that that is his baby with Elena? I mean, there's so much to break down, but I want to know what you all thought about it, so let's talk about it in the comments below. So before I even get into this recap, just initial thoughts coming off of the episode. I love this episode. Now, if you saw my review last week, I was hooked after the first, the last 20 minutes of the episode. The first half was fine. It was just very generic. You've seen this type of story before, but it wasn't until the end that I'm just like, oh, Elena's dead. And not only is she dead, but she was brutally murdered. And who did this? Well, the show is obviously pointing the finger at Jonathan, and there's a lot of big stuff that we learned about him and his character in this episode. So let's break this thing off with a recap, starting off with the episode opening with Elena. Now, she is still trying to reach out for her husband. She talks to Henry. Henry tells her that before Jonathan left, he came in his room, gave him a kiss on the forehead, and it wasn't like, okay, son, I'll see you later in a couple days. It was like, no, son, I'm gone. You might not see me again, right? You got that kind of vibe from how Henry was describing everything. And we see that Grace sees on the news that the details of Elena's murder has now been spread out. So again, this is just really setting the stage for who's the killer, why was she killed, who did it, all this stuff. So I'm loving how the show really opened, and it really kind of set the stage for a fantastic episode in my opinion. So we see Henry trying to convince his mom why Jonathan's not responding. I mean, he's there for his dad, right? I mean, I don't know if he's covering for his dad, if he knows more than what he's leading off to. Again, everyone seems to have skeleton in the closet, but I think it's more or less him just being optimistic. Him telling his mom, hey mom, it's okay. Maybe he doesn't have Wi-Fi in Cleveland, maybe he's just busy, but we know what's going on. Jonathan's obviously on the run, but I wonder if it is pointing towards that Henry might know some things about his dad. I mean, just last week, he found out that his dad, I don't want to say he's a liar to his son, but again, he kind of lied about the story about the dog, why they can't have a dog, but we know that his dog was killed, and he, gave his son the soft blow of why he doesn't want the dog. But again, it's just like little Easter eggs of just like this family, Henry, Jonathan, and especially Grace, they have this idea of what their family is, but what really is it, right? What is the secrets this family holds? And I don't know if I'm looking too much into Henry covering for his dad, or if he's just being optimistic to help his mom out. Let me know what you all thought in the comments below. Now, throughout the episode, we get these different, almost dreamlike sequences where we see Grace imagining Elena on the couch with her baby. We see her later on imagining her making out with Jonathan. So there's a lot of dreamlike sequences that are put in place in this episode. And again, is it a dream? Is it that Grace knows more? Is it that she was spying on her husband? Let me know what you all thought of all the dream sequences and if you guys like that in this episode. So we see from the following day that the other mothers kind of talk about Elena's husband turning himself in, and that he might have been jealous of Elena with the men that was, targeting her and swarming her at the banquet. So they're kind of making all these theories. These housewives in a sense are just like making up their own little narrative about who could be the killer. And so far they're thinking that the husband's the killer, but we talk about him a little bit later in this episode. So this is something we should all keep an eye on. So in this episode, and we saw this last week, Grace's therapy sessions. Now, this week we get the continuation of the two husbands, and one of them were cheating on the other. And we see this week the husband's grabbing on his arm, almost like, he's controlling him or making him say things that he wants Grace to hear. So you see Grace observing this, right? And we see that Grace can obviously call out people's flaws within their relationship, but she doesn't really see the flaws within her relationship, not seeing that her husband is having an affair, or did she know? And she's just, again, they're just painting this picture of this perfect scenario. But it's very interesting to keep an eye on these therapy sessions, because I think with her clients, we're seeing her have a mirror in front of her, and she's starting to realize, oh, are these the behaviors that me and my husband have? Are these things that I do and my husband, or the vice versa? So I think these therapy sessions are not just randomly placed within an episode. I think they're really giving us like a sense of where Grace is headed at, and she's now starting to realize that she's been in a very toxic relationship for a very long time. So we see the continuation of Grace trying to figure out where Jonathan is. We see that she visits Jonathan's hospital, his place of work, right? And she runs into Stewart. Now, Stewart is very standoffish with Grace, right? She says, oh, did you get my phone call? Have you seen Jonathan? What about the conference in Cleveland? And Stewart's like, conference in Cleveland? There's no conference in Cleveland. And he's like, I can't talk to you. I'm under strict rules not to talk about it. And at first you're thinking like, is he covered? Again, is this another character covering for Jonathan? But obviously we find out what happened with Jonathan, his employment status with this hospital. But I thought it was a very interesting scene because, again, it's kind of setting up this idea of like people and their secrets and people covering up for this perfect character in Jonathan. But we find out why Stewart was so standoffish when it comes to talking to Grace. So we get a brief scene here. It wasn't that long, but I thought it was interesting. When we see Grace visit her father, Franklin, they have this brief conversation about talking about their marriage. And it seems like to me, Franklin kind of alluded to that their relationship between Jonathan and Grace maybe isn't as pitch perfect as it may be out to be. As she said, we've been good for a while now. Is that alluding to their relationship at one point in time was very dark, very sinister, some, affairs going on, some other stuff going on? So I think that conversation, even though it was brief, again, I think this episode really kind of laying the breadcrumbs and Easter eggs that their marriage might have been on the rocks for a while, and Jonathan might have this behavior that he's done in the past. And again, Grace has just kind of either looked over it, ignored it, but now she's starting to realize about this toxicity that she was in her relationship, or because she had been implicit to what was going on this whole time. So the detectives come in and kind of break up the conversation between Grace and her father, Franklin, as they take her down to the police station. And this is where we get so many big moments. Seeing Nicole Kidman in this scene as Grace, as she find out all this news, was just incredible acting. You literally saw the moment when she found out that he's been terminated for his job and why he was terminated. You see the pain, the confusion in her eyes. Or again, is she just playing a part of this whole ruse? Is she a part of this? I don't know, guys. I think the show is, David E. Kelley is way too smart to just give us all the stuff up front. I think this show is going to allude to, I don't know, this is my prediction, that Nicole Kidman as Grace knew about certain things more than she's leading off to. So going back into the scene, we find out from the detectives that Jonathan has been terminated from the hospital over 3 months, and it explains why Stewart was so standoffish to giving Grace information, because Jonathan doesn't work anymore, and we can't talk about why he was fired because there was some type of agreement or some type of paperwork saying that you can't go into details of why he was let go from his job. So we find that there was disciplinary actions involved over 3 times. We learned that last year that there was an incident with a patient, which we find out who that patient was, and Grace, again, she doesn't know what the hell's going on. At least she's alluding to it, right? And she's kind of defending Jonathan, saying that, he was very close with his patients. Sometimes he would hug them, show a little bit more affection. He's not just your standard doctor that just tells you your diagnosis is out of the room. He's very kind of involved in the situation. He wants to make his patients feel well. So she's defending him almost like Henry did earlier in the episode. But we see the detectives again kind of grilling her, saying, why are you protecting him? Where is he at? But again, I just love the acting from Nicole Kidman as Grace in this moment, because again, she's playing she's so shocked about the news, but then she's very on the fence. And this is the first time we've seen all season, everyone knows this Grace to be this nice, perfect, nice person, but she pushes back at the detectives, right? She's just like, either you're going to arrest me or I'm going to go out. And that's the first time we've seen like this pushback and this kind of little bit of an attitude from Grace. And I'm kind of loving the different dimensions and the different complexities of this character. So yet another big mic drop moment. We find out that patient that made the complaint last year is the one and only Elena, and we find out that Miguel was actually had a tumor, and that Jonathan was looking after him. So all the pieces of the puzzle are starting to come together. As I had mentioned in my non-spoiler review last week, what is the relationship between Elena and Jonathan? And we now kind of find that out, right? They even mentioned, and I'm talk about it a little bit in the ending, that he kind of helped out with the school and everything with the school. We'll discuss a little bit later, is he the father of that baby? There was just so many big moments. But again, when we find out that Elena's son was a patient of Jonathan, the Pandora's box just opened up completely. So as we transition, we see Grace goes back home, but before she even goes back home, we get yet another dreamlike sequence where she's imagining Jonathan, having this affair with Elena. And also we see from Grace's dad, he suggests that they go ahead and go to the summer house that we'll talk about at the end. But again, these imaginations, these dreamlike sequences, again, just let me know what you all are interpreting that as. Is she just envisioning it? Is it the show just kind of showing us how things played out? Let me know what you all thought of those dreamlike sequences. But again, we go back to Grace going to her home, and this is something I thought she should have done day one. She finally goes into Jonathan's office. She's looking around for information. She goes in his closet, and she finds what I assume is a woman's scarf and also women's perfume, which she sprays her perfume on her arm, and the smell smells pretty familiar. And then they show us a little quick scene of Elena when Elena was butt ass naked at the gym, that she remembers that smell. So we see the following day that Grace drops off Henry to the school, and this is where we see people whispering and people looking at Grace all weird, because the news has kind of got out that the prime suspect now is Jonathan, because we find out in this scene that the husband has an alibi. He was not near Elena's death during the time that she passed away. So everyone now is assuming that it's Jonathan. They can't find him. So the news gets out pretty quickly, right? A lot of chatterboxes going on. But in this moment, we see the principal approaches Grace and say, hey, we don't want you here right now. It's just too much. You're too hot, right? You're just too much going on. We don't want this school, this high procedure school, to be kind of looked at this way. So we want you to maybe find someone else to drop off Henry, which obviously Grace doesn't take that news well, but she's kind of saved at the last moment by her friend Sylvia, which we're going to definitely break down that scene. But it's very interesting, again, to see how all the news is coming out so quickly. And now this perfect family of Grace and Jonathan, this perfect relationship, is now starting to look very toxic to a lot of people. And a lot of people think that Jonathan is indeed the killer. So we see between this scene between Sylvia and Grace, she fills her in again about the husband having an alibi, but this is another big moment here. So we find out from Sylvia that Jonathan looked for legal advice from Sylvia due to the incident that happened with Elena a year ago. He asked her for legal advice, and I'm just thinking in my head, and let me know in the comments. Yes, she's a lawyer. There's the client confidentiality that you can't talk about in any of your cases, but it seems like Sylvia likes to talk a lot. So I'm surprised that she was able to hold her tongue and not tell Grace about what happened. She does say that she assumed that Grace knew, which she didn't, but it's just very interesting. Again, there seems to be so much cover up for Jonathan in this episode, again, of people keeping secrets, keeping things that they think people might know, but they don't know. So again, this whole show about lying, deceit, and this people keeping their skeletons in the closet has been like the central theme, at least in these first two episodes. So again, she kind of fills Grace in, saying, long story short, that there wasn't enough evidence to prove Jonathan to be guilty, but we find out that he still ended up getting, fired from his job. Apparently the charges were dropped. Again, we are to assume, based on what Jonathan says later in this episode, that he probably made up with Elena to drop the file, but he still lost his job in doing so. But he probably was able to maneuver his way back into her heart and say, hey, can we figure this out? I have a hookup that might be able to give your son a scholarship to the school. I might be able to pay the bills of that baby of ours potentially. So again, I think it was just such a big moment. Yet again, Nicole Kidman as Grace is just finding out so much about her husband, or maybe again, just might sound like stuff that she might have been aware of. When I hope that's something that we explore in the future episodes. So we see the police now have a warrant to the Fraser's house. We see that Mendoza is in the house. They're gathering up items. And this is the first time that Édgar Ramírez as Mendoza is somewhat nice to Grace. He kind of says, this is standard. I've been doing this for a while. I understand what you're going through. And Grace is just like, don't patronize me. And as they're taking the brush and all the personal belongings of Jonathan. And the reason they're taking the personal belongings is because there's going to be a DNA test going on, because Elena's husband doesn't think that child is his, that the baby may indeed be Jonathan. And that's something that I had mentioned last week in my non-spoiler review. Who is the father of that child? It may be Jonathan, ladies and gentlemen. So this moment was just, again, I don't know how Grace, the character, didn't have a heart attack or just didn't pass out due to a panic attack after all these reveals. Or again, I don't know, is this show saying that she may know more than she's leading off to? So as we wrap up the episode, we see Grace and Henry are now at the summer house. We see that Henry is pissed about leaving and running away from the situation. We see Grace finally having a breakdown and being upset, and we see that Henry kind of embraces her. And then as we kind of wrap up the episode, the last 5 minutes or so, Jonathan has arrived. So he's at the summer house. He scares the hell out of Grace, puts his hand over his mouth, just immediately says, "It wasn't me. I didn't murder her." We see Grace is just ready to explode. Jonathan tries to tell her that Elena was psychotic. She was possessive. She got obsessed with this relationship. She got obsessed with you, and that's where things just kind of fell apart, where I just wanted to separate myself from her, and that's where at the benefit, she was crying because he, I guess, broke things off allegedly. So I guess the biggest thing for me, for you all, is who can we trust? We didn't know much of Elena outside of the first episode, right? And we don't know much of Jonathan. So just what's your gut reaction, guys? Do you trust Jonathan or do you trust Elena? Or is there someone else involved entirely? Is it the husband? Is it another character that we haven't met quite yet? Again, I thought that this ending was so great. We see Grace calling the police as, Henry is hugging his dad for maybe the last time, because I think, we're going to have maybe a court drama coming up in these next few episodes. But I thought this episode was fantastic. So many great moments. So many great reveals. I thought the performance by Nicole Kidman as she's getting all this information told to her, again, is she really that surprised, or is she pretending to be surprised? Again, it just goes into the great performance by her. Again, I think this episode really kind of is giving us the breadcrumbs that we are assuming that it's Jonathan, but I think there's going to be a really big twist. Again, could it be that, again, this is me theorizing for, 4 or 5 episodes from now, could Grace have found out about this affair and she just acting all brand new to it, and she was the one that killed Elena? I don't know, guys. Let me know your thoughts, your pros, your cons, your theories, your predictions for the week ahead. Let's have a great discussion in the comments. As always, make sure to like, share, comment below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell so you don't miss any of my other Undoing reviews, other reviews that I do on this channel, and all the fun things we do here at Movie Files. Hope you guys enjoyed this review. Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you all on the next video.